guys, good morning. Welcome to the Finger Lakes One podcast, Auburn Doubledays edition. I'm Claudia Bellofatto, joined by the one, the only, the lovely hitting coach, Mark Harris, the hitting coach for the Auburn Doubledays, looking wicked spiffy. I'm so used to seeing you decked out in Doubledays gear. How we doing?
I'm doing just fine. It's amazing when people see you in normal clothes, they kind of sit back and go,
Almost
is that really you? Is that really you?
I love it. Got a little tan going, looking great. Is this your first podcast?
It is. It
Okay.
is. I'm excited.
Exciting stuff. We got some cool stuff to talk about today. Me and Mark actually had an interview. It was a pregame last week or so, and he said, I have a really good idea for the podcast. He said, top 5 things you wouldn't know about minor league baseball. And he told me a few of them, which I honestly had no idea, and I'm pretty sure no one else does either. So we're going to get to that. But first, let's just talk about your life in baseball, because you grew up watching it because your dad played. Gale Harris, he played for the New York Giants baseball, right? And the Detroit Tigers.
Correct.
So what was it like growing up watching him play?
Well, I actually was quite young when he finished his career playing. My sisters got to watch him play. I only was in at the tail end, and I have a very little memory of him, but I do remember being passed back and forth in the stands, hanging out in the clubhouse as a little guy stealing the candy bars, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But from that point in time on, that's kind of all I remembered around my house. Even though he wasn't playing, it was about baseball.
And then you were in the Yankees organization yourself.
I was.
Talk about that a little bit.
I played briefly. I think it was around 4 years total with the Yankees in the minors, and got up to the AA level a couple years, and then had some injuries and some sickness that made me make a decision that the problem was better off that I look to live a normal life than to stay any longer. So I got out and was looking for things to do, and was out of baseball for a couple of years and decided that I really needed to get back in because that was my passion. I enjoyed baseball, and I thought I had some things to offer to some people.
So you knew coaching was kind of the next step?
I did. I did. I was fortunate growing up, obviously, to have my dad and have some great coaches around me, and even to get where I got to as far as the level that I played, where I got drafted, that type of thing. I was always a guy that was attention to detail guy, learned the right way to do things, that type of thing, and kind of wanted to see if I could instill it in some players as they were interested in playing also.
You have an interesting philosophy, I guess you could say, as a coach. You mentioned it in our pregame interview. You have a motto, kind of, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I do. It's funny how you go through, and as far as teaching is concerned, and how things have changed from year to year to year, from when I was a player to now being a coach for close to 10 or over 15 years now. Kids have changed, just like the media has changed. The backgrounds in which they come from have changed. The ways of learning obviously have changed. So basically, you have to adapt as a coach. And my philosophy is that you have to be a psychologist first, a father second, and then a coach third. Because everybody learns in a different way. And you have to figure out what is the right way to teach this individual. How can I get to him? What is the method I have to use? Is it old school? Is it leave him alone for a while? Is it is he a audio? Is he a visual learner? That type of thing. You have to find that out. And then second of all, for me, the most important thing, in order for them to trust you, to get this points across and the things you're trying to teach across, they have to trust you, and you almost have to become a father to them and get them to and instill in them that, okay, I'm here to help you. And then once you do that, then fathers out there will know, then you have the ability to teach. And once they trust you, then they say that, okay, he knows the best thing for me, let's go.
And we've talked about before how big the mental game is for everything, really, because it kind of goes mental and then obviously skill. but you did a little scouting as well before coaching, and I think that's one thing a lot of people kind of overlook is when you're out there scouting and looking at a guy, you're kind of looking at how he handles certain things during the game and what he's like off of the field. Is that something that, you kind of had to learn as you were going?
Well, I'm fortunate. I think scouting was the reason I got into scouting. Obviously, I wanted to get back into baseball. My kids were growing up. I had promised my wife through my dad had played for a long time, and just the way things were then. He played winter ball in Venezuela. He wasn't home in the wintertime. He was gone during the season. And the families traveled. So I promised my wife when I got done playing, listen, I'm going to be home while the kids are growing up. And scouting was something that I could get into in a 3-state area. I was fortunate with the Rangers and the Phillies to cover those areas for a period of 7 or 8 years. And what it did, it gave me a new perspective on obviously the scouting and the evaluation and the professional, where these guys could stand on a professional level. And then so you added that. So once I started coaching, I had seen this level. Now I'm seeing this level. Now I'm going to see this level. So it all worked out as far as putting things together to where now I've established my own thought process on how things work.
How different is baseball kind of as a whole, whether it's the game or the fans or how many people are actually interested in it? Because you've been in the game for so long. How different is it today?
Well, obviously, I think it's changed. I think when I was growing up, I think the people in my era when it was growing up, the teaching was a little different. It was old school. I mean, when you say old school, that means that it was hard. I mean, when you got told when you didn't do things right, you ran foul poles when you didn't do things right. It was almost like the Marines when I grew up. That it was a mental type of thing that you approached it in a way that your first and foremost goal was to win, and you were going to compete, and that's how that most of the people in my era learned it. Where it's different today, again, because of different type of teaching, the different background, the different philosophies that kids come from, and that's why it's so important to find out exactly how to teach. Today I have maybe in the last 3 years, maybe I've had 2 or 3 kids that loved it the way that I grew up. They came from a background of old school. They wanted you to yell, they wanted you to scream, they wanted you to put their finger in their face. That's how they got pushed. And so every now and then you get those kind. It's the way that I came from, but it's different these days. And I think probably the difference these days in the baseball itself, when I signed, I don't know how, but I got drafted in the first round in 1978. I weighed 162 pounds. I don't think I ever weighed more than that when I played. I don't think today that, surely when I got drafted in the first round, I don't know how much of a chance I would have gotten to play in these days because it's not a small man's game anymore. You'd like for it to be, but it's not. I mean, you have Jose Altuve that proves you wrong, 5'6". But if you look, when I played, the catching, the second base, the shortstop, and center field, they were picked mostly for their defensive abilities. They built teams to be strong defensively up the middle. Hitting was not one of my greater fortes, but I could throw, I could run, I could play defense. The guys that were drafted as second base and center field guys were the same way. You got your power from third base, first base, left field, right field. And now it's completely different. Just because you look for guys, first and foremost, that can swing the bat, drive in runs, be an offensive player, and then if you get one, like a Trey Turner that we have with the Nationals, or obviously like the Derek Jeters, or those type of players that can play above average defense and run, that type of thing, then you have a plus. But nowadays, it's pretty much about the offensive part of the game.
Do you have whether it was a season or a certain game or a certain player or moment that you'll kind of always remember that was really life-changing for you, or something that just really stuck with you?
I think what you do, I think overall, and I was thinking about this before, I mean, as a player, probably the idea of having my dad in the stands when I played my first professional game. It's hard, and guys will tell you, it's difficult growing up sometimes with a dad that played in the major leagues. And I would be 100% honest with you. He did not for one day ever put pressure on me to play, ever. And that's the honest truth. But when I asked, he was always there. Dad, let's go hit ground balls. Okay. Dad, let's go take batting practice. But he never said, okay, we're going to go. We're going to go. Because he wanted to make sure that I wanted it, and I always did. And but the idea of pleasing him, the self-inflicted, the self-infused thing of wanting to please your dad. And every kid that had a dad that played will tell you the same thing. But having him in the stands when I played my first professional game was a huge moment. And coaching moments, I tell you, probably I've had numerous ones, and they repeat all the time. Just for the fact of the matter is, kids that we are close to, kids that weren't supposed to make it to the major leagues, make it to the major leagues. You get that first call from the first day that they're there, and reminisce about the time that you spent and where you are, where you were, where you are, how you got there. So it makes it all worthwhile. And probably my biggest one was Billy Burns, who was an outfielder for Oakland A's, who was $1,000 sign for the Nationals. Had never learned to switch hit. He learned to switch hit under me. I had him for 3 seasons. He got traded for a big leaguer from us to Oakland. 2 years later, he was runner-up in Rookie of the Year voting in the American League. So those things like that, and it's no different than having Jake Knoll, who played here in Auburn 4 years ago, who made the big leagues this year. Guys like that have gone through from the time that you started, and it just makes you feel that what you did was worthwhile when they come back and say, I remember what we did and how we did it, and laugh about all the things that we went through, and maybe mind saying, listen, in 3 years you're not going to be hitting this way, so we might as well change it now. Mm-hmm. Or this is not going to be happening 3 years from now. And we have great conversations in spring training. We're in the cage, we'll be hitting in the cage, and they'll be going, remember when? And I said, yeah, I remember it well. And I said, but it's all a process, and we've talked about that before.
Yeah. And you talk about kind of yourself being a father figure, and so many of these guys are so far away from home, and some of them will have their parents come to the games, a few of the games during the season, but some won't see their parents at all. So you're kind of a fill and roll for that. They're with you basically every single day. Do you have conversations with them that totally are unrelated to baseball?
Getting back to the father thing, yes, without a doubt. Sometimes I'll go into the cage and I'll make special appointments with guys in the cage, and they'll bring their bat and they won't even pick up their bat. Because I can know as you do this, and as a father of 2 older kids, and if you do this long enough, you can get a read that something's wrong. And a lot of times, like you said, they don't have anybody to talk to or to bounce it off of. So we'll sit down and I'll go, hey, what's going on? Or I'll say, okay, I know what's going on. Let me let me hear about it. And their eyes will get like that. I said, listen, not my first rodeo, and you have to remember one thing about these kids that play at this level. Very few have failed at baseball before. They're always the best at where they came from. They were the best pitcher, they were the best hitter, they were the best fielder. And nobody likes, and nobody's used to look up on the scoreboard and seeing a batting average that they're embarrassed by. No pitcher is excited about looking up on the scoreboard and looking at stats and seeing an ERA or a record that they're not happy with. So baseball itself, which is part of the conversation, is about dealing with failure. It's like this. I mean, sometimes you go up there and it's a hitter's cliche. For 2 weeks, the baseball looks like a softball, which means it's coming in and it looks so big and so delicious. You just are hitting line drives all over the place. And then when things aren't going well, it looks like an aspirin. Every pitch to you looks like an aspirin. And that's the way it is. And it's like this. And it's how you adjust to this and try to make it like that. That it's not way up here, it's not way down there, emotionally and baseball-wise. The guys that make those adjustments are the guys that continue to play. The guys that let it get to them or can't make the physical adjustments are the guys that don't play. I had, and I'll add this, 3 years ago, if you can believe this, I blew out my knee hitting a ground ball, which I have no idea, probably hit 10 million in my lifetime. I blew some ligaments and a cartilage out, and I was down in Florida rehabbing for, 18 weeks of non-weight bearing. And one of my favorite players that has rehabbed with me, I never coached him because he was in the big leagues, that he rehabbed with me was Jason Worth, an outfielder for the Nationals and the Phillies, and an icon in Washington. And JW and I, when he came to rehab with my teams, whether it be Harrisburg or Potomac, wherever was close, and for him to get games in. His locker was always next to mine and the coach, and we got to be very good friends. And J-Dub was in Florida rehabbing one of his last injuries. And we started to have a conversation just in general. And he started talking about it, and he goes, Harry, he says, I'm out there today. He said, I'm working on consistently hitting the ball the other way with my mindset thinking about right center to right field. He said, you know what? He said, if you look back at it in my 18 or 20-year career, it's my whole career and everybody's career is about making adjustments. He says, I came up. He said, I had a good year. He said, next thing you know, the winter time, the other teams, they make adjustments to me. I had to make adjustments to them. Then it went from series to series. When you're playing a team one series and you have success and the next series comes and they're pitching you a certain way, I had to do that. He said, and I ended up understanding that it's all about adjustments from time to time to time. And I honestly say that I had outstanding coaches, amazing coaches that try to talk to me and try to make me understand that about the adjustment. He said, I had a good career, a really good career. He said, but I could have had a great career if I would have understood more about these adjustments and what people were trying to tell me. And it was one of the best conversations I've had, just sitting there listening to him talk about that, about a guy that, like I said, that had great success in the big leagues, but said he could have done better if he would have been more accepting to what people were trying to tell him.
And just playing pro ball in general comes with so many adjustments. And we talked about this the other day. A lot of people don't know exactly what goes on day to day for these guys. So explain that for me. A day in the life for one.
Okay, let's just say example day in the life on a home. Just say that we are getting off a trip. We've had many nights where we've gotten back from a trip 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. We have a home game that day. Well, usually the day starts, we have the kids report around 1 or 1:30 in the afternoon. The people that have been injured or need medical help with Kirby, our doctor guy, they have to report to do their training as far as their treatments are concerned. The batting cage is open usually from 1:30 to 2:30. Usually on the day that we come back, I won't have appointments with guys, but it's kind of somewhat mandatory that guys come in and we do cage routines. They do their cage routines. We'll go from there, 2:30, they'll go back in. We usually have 3 o'clock stretch. Everybody goes out, stretches at 3 o'clock. We'll do the throwing programs, the pitchers will do their thing, and then there is some type of team fundamental involved, whether it be cuts and relays, whether it be rundowns, whether it be pickoffs, whether it be bunt coverage. Usually at home, once we get home, usually once a day that we'll do some type of team fundamental. Then we will take batting practice, and then we'll go in. The kids get a break, usually an hour and a half break. We'll go out and play the game. And that's usually the daily routine that we do. And that usually does not waver unless we have a day like we had the other day when we got home at 7:30 in the morning, which we won't have the kids come to the ballpark, and we do a thing called show and go, which is basically you come, the batting cages are optional. If you want to go out there and warm up, you can. If you don't, you go out and stretch, you throw, you play. And we are very, very, very conscious of monitoring the workload and or how much we're doing in order to keep the energy level so that we can play the game and try to play it efficiently. But at this point in time of the season, there's quite a few guys that aren't feeling their legs very well or feeling the effects of a long college and or spring training and or extended spring training season.
So remember that, people. 7 o'clock game. Those guys are there all day.
Yeah, since 1 o'clock mostly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
All right, so real quick, let's go over those 5 things that people don't know about minor league baseball, because some of them were really interesting to me, but I know you have a few more.
Well,
So,
the one about, I think the misconception is about minor league baseball is that the players only get paid for the months that they play. They do not get paid in spring training. They get meals in spring training and a housing at a very, very nice hotel, but they do not get paid in spring training. Once the season starts, they get paid from the time, say our guys get paid from April, May, June, July, August. Once September 1st comes, that's when their paycheck stops. So they usually either have to give a job, go back and live with mom and dad, do something else to supplement this 6-month part-time job that is baseball. And that's something that a lot of people don't know.
Right.
I think probably another thing that I wanted to mention today is our program with the Latin players. So that's just something that people have no idea about. When the Latin kids come from the Dominican, Venezuela, over there, they come to Florida, and they are taken care of to the point where we pick them up at the hotel, we bring them to the ballpark, we feed them breakfast, we do baseball. They do so many hours a week of Rosetta Stone English. They are on a program. They have to sign into a computer, and then they play baseball. We put them on the bus, take them back to the hotel. Their first times here in the United States are monitored to get them acclimated to where they can be in the United States and function. And then as they pass these certain programs on Rosetta Stone, then they'll go. We have 4 or 5 guys on the Doubledays this year that it's their first time out on their own, in public, living on their own, ordering food, paying bills, getting to the ballpark on time. And it's, it's part of the process. The Nationals do a great job of that. Very good job.
Okay. Got a number 3?
Well, how about 48 days in a row without a day off in spring training? How about that?
And what about, you talked about that you can't really coach them for the first, 30 days?
Good one,
right?
good one, exactly. Okay. Other than the kids that we have spring training, and then we have the kids that make the long season teams. They go with their teams to Hagerstown, Potomac, Harrisburg, or Fresno. And we have some younger kids and or players that didn't make the long season team. They stay in a place called extended spring training, which is like spring training. Every day you do the fundamental, the batting practice, the defensive work, and yet you still play a game against the other team's extended spring training. Then once June comes and the draft comes, then they come here to Auburn with us. Then we get the college players from the draft at Auburn. The college players that we get in the draft, we are not allowed to physically change anything mechanically with them for 30 days. All we want those guys to do is learn to show up, learn the routines, learn to get to the ballpark, and try to settle into professional baseball. We don't want to give them so much to think about all at once that it's going to cloud their experience in getting used to professional baseball. After 30 days, myself and the hierarchy, which are called the Rovers, which is my hitting boss, the pitching boss, they come in, they look at these kids, they evaluate, and we set programs for these kids about what we might want to change for them eventually in the next 30 days leading up to the process of instructional league, which is a month after our regular season's over. So they would take that learning program that we put in place for them and start here for the last 30 days and continue in instructional league and go for next year. So yeah, it's pretty much like we talked about, more of a mental thing for the first 30 days for those kids, just getting them involved about what's going on. But believe me, there have been numerous players that have asked for instruction in less than 30 days because they're going, hey, listen, what I'm doing is really not working. We need to get going.
So obviously there's a lot of differences between the major league and minor league. In the players I'm talking about especially, are there some similarities in terms of, mental aspects of it, or kind of like what they're like in the clubhouse, or is it kind of completely different from your experience?
Individually, it's all individual. It's all, you've got guys that are consumed with it. You've got guys that are so naturally gifted that they can go out and do their work and before the game do what's needed to do a little extra and go and have success and just go. And you just look and you go, i.e. Anthony Rendon. Amazing. He's truly the most gifted player that I've ever been around. But then you have some that, that every day it is to the grindstone every single day. And it differs because every guy has developed their programs and what works for them throughout their minor leagues. As you go and we give them more freedom, a hitter might have a day where he doesn't go to the batting cage, or he doesn't want to hit on the field because he feels like he's in good shape as far as where he is hitting-wise. A guy might not take ground balls, but the next day he might not feel like he's doing what he needs to do. He might call you and say, hey, let's go early, let's do some extra work. So it's kind of an individual thing that we want them to establish their own routines of what they need to do to get ready to play, because that's what a routine is. It's supposed to prepare you to play that night, whatever you need to do to get ready to play that night. And once 6:30 comes, and it's what I tell the guys all the time, once 6:30 comes, you're going to be no better a player than you were. So just go out and play. And after the game, we'll talk about, or in the morning, we'll talk about what you did hitting-wise, fielding-wise, or whatever. But once 6:30 comes, you just go play. And you hope you've done enough work to prepare you to play. And then when you go on the plate, you've done enough work that day to say, okay, I'm ready to hit. Because I won't talk about physical things in the dugout. I would not talk about hitting mechanics in the dugout during the game. I want you to concentrate on what the pitcher's throwing, how he's throwing it, the game itself.
Before we go, one last question.
Yes.
I talked with Rocket a little bit about this. You have so much talent on this team, and I'm sure it's frustrating, especially for these guys, to not get all of the wins that they want or not get the record that they're looking for. As the season wraps up, what's kind of, a piece of advice that you give them to kind of get them in the right mindset so when they leave the season that they're not kind of bummed out because of the record?
Well, I think that for me individually, I want them to leave because it's all a process, and we've talked about that before, from the start, from the time they get here to the time they end. I want some guys to leave on a positive note, mental-wise, about where they are, especially mechanically with hitting, if a pitcher is making progress as far as his location is concerned, or one pitch that he's gotten better at, something positive they can take. Because most every guy that we have, other than a couple, are going to Instructional League, which is a month of more individualized training. And I would like to see to take that into. And also, too, I would like to for these guys to take some failure into that, to say, you know what, not as easy as I thought it was. There's the competition is good in professional baseball. And just like I said, and I've told them, this is the easiest league you're ever going to play in. It's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder. The pitching's going to get better. The runners are going to get faster. The hitters are going to get better. The defense is going to get better. This is the easiest league you'll ever play in. So do your homework and see where you are, evaluate where you are and where you got to get to.
Awesome. All right. Hitting coach for the Auburn Doubledays, Mark Harris, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, we have a game tonight, start of a 6-game homestand. Make sure to watch the pregame show on FigureLakes1.com and check out all the awesome shows online as well.
7-game homestand. I think we have a doubleheader Friday.
All right, we got a doubleheader. More free baseball.
More free baseball.
All right, guys, thanks so much for watching.